Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Hatred. Tyler Brooks had always known he was different from the silver spoon crowd his wife Amanda came from. While she grew up in the sprawling Grayson estate with servants and trust funds, Tyler had clawed his way up from a trailer park in Ohio. His mother, a factory worker, had died when he was 16, leaving him to fend for himself. He put himself through college with construction jobs and military service, earning every dollar through sweat and determination. That grit had caught Amanda's attention 8 years ago at a charity gala where Tyler was working security. She was 24 then, fresh out of college and rebelling against her father's expectations. Tyler, 26 and hardened by life, represented everything her sheltered world lacked: danger, authenticity, raw masculinity. Robert Grayson, Amanda's father and heir to a shipping fortune, had disapproved from day one. "You're marrying beneath yourself," Robert had told Amanda before their wedding. Tyler had overheard through the door of Robert's study. "That boy has nothing to offer except muscles and attitude." But Amanda had been defiant then, claiming she loved Tyler's strength and independence. They'd married despite Robert's threats to cut her off, though he'd eventually relented when their son Dylan was born. The old man was obsessed with legacy and bloodline. Having a grandson softened his stance toward Tyler, though barely. Tyler had spent 7 years building his construction business from nothing, taking on the most dangerous jobs, working 18-hour days. His company, Brooks Construction, now employed 40 men and had contracts worth millions. He'd proven himself in Robert's world, but it had never been enough. The old man still looked at him like dirt on his shoe. The marriage had been passionate at first. Amanda was drawn to Tyler's intensity, his refusal to bow to anyone. In bed, she craved his dominance, his ability to make her feel small and vulnerable in ways her privileged upbringing never had. But as the years passed and Tyler's business consumed more of his time, cracks began to show. Amanda started attending more social events alone, reconnecting with old friends from her elite circle. She complained about Tyler's long hours, his calloused hands, his preference for beer over wine. The woman who once found his roughness exciting now seemed embarrassed by it at dinner parties and charity functions. Tyler noticed, but said nothing. He'd learned early that words were worthless, actions mattered. He continued building his empire, believing that success would eventually earn Robert's respect and secure his family's future. He loved Dylan fiercely and thought Amanda's complaints were just temporary frustration. He was wrong about many things, but never about the importance of loyalty. In Tyler's world, betrayal was the ultimate sin, punishable by complete destruction. His father had abandoned his mother when Tyler was 10, leaving them in poverty. Tyler had sworn he'd never forgive such weakness, such cowardice. That moral code would prove crucial in the storm to come. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. The first real sign of trouble came 6 months before the inheritance announcement. Tyler had returned home early from a job site, his clothes covered in concrete dust, when he heard Amanda on the phone in her study. Her voice carried a tone he'd never heard before, intimate, conspiratorial. "I can't keep pretending much longer," she was saying. "Tyler suspects nothing, but Dylan is starting to ask questions about why I'm gone so much." Tyler had frozen outside the door, his hand on the knob. Through the crack, he could see Amanda pacing, one hand running through her blonde hair in a gesture he recognized as nervous excitement. "No, he's too focused on his business to notice anything else," she continued. "Besides, even if he did find out, what could he do? Father controls everything that matters in this town." The conversation had lasted another 10 minutes, filled with hushed promises and plans for secret meetings. Tyler had retreated to his workshop in the garage, his mind racing. The Amanda he'd married wouldn't have been capable of such deception, but people changed. Money and comfort had a way of corrupting even the strongest character. That night, he'd tested her, asking casual questions about her day, her plans for the weekend. She'd lied smoothly, mentioning book clubs and charity committees. Tyler had smiled and nodded, filing away every falsehood for future reference. Over the following weeks, Tyler began documenting Amanda's lies with methodical precision. He installed tracking software on her phone, small cameras in her car, and began following her occasionally. What he discovered made his blood run cold with rage. Amanda was having an affair with David Hensley, Robert's personal attorney and longtime family friend. Hensley was married with 2 teenage daughters, a pillar of the community who gave speeches about family values at the country club. The hypocrisy was staggering, but what truly enraged Tyler was the location of their meetings. They were using Dylan's bedroom in the old Grayson family cabin for their encounters, defiling the space where Tyler's son had played and slept during family visits. The thought of his wife and her lover rutting in his child's bed like animals filled Tyler with a murderous fury that took all his self-control to contain. But Tyler was a patient man when he needed to be. He'd learned in the military that emotion was the enemy of effective action. Instead of confronting them immediately, he began gathering evidence, planning his response with the same methodical approach he used for his most complex construction projects. He discovered that the affair had been going on for 2 years, starting shortly after Hensley's wife had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's. Amanda and David had bonded over the burden of caring for broken people, as Tyler overheard in one recorded conversation. They spoke about Tyler and David's wife as obstacles to their happiness, inconveniences to be managed until they could be together openly. The depth of their callousness was breathtaking. Amanda complained about Tyler's crude behavior and embarrassing background, while David assured her that once his wife's condition worsened enough to require full-time care, they could begin planning their future together. They spoke about Dylan as a complication, discussing how to minimize Tyler's influence over his own son. Tyler began sleeping separately from Amanda, claiming work stress and early mornings. She seemed relieved rather than concerned, which told him everything he needed to know about the state of their marriage. But he continued playing the role of the oblivious husband, even as he planned their destruction with increasing detail. The ammunition he was gathering would be devastating when deployed correctly. But Tyler wanted more than just a divorce and custody battle. He wanted total victory, complete destruction of everyone who had betrayed him. For that, he would need to be patient a little longer. Chapter 3. The Moment of Truth. The day of Robert Grayson's inheritance announcement arrived with October rain hammering the windows of the family estate. Tyler had been summoned along with Amanda and Dylan for what Robert had cryptically called important family business. The old man's health had been declining rapidly over the past year, and Tyler suspected this was about end-of-life planning. The estate's main parlor was formal and intimidating, filled with dark mahogany furniture and oil paintings of long-dead Graysons. Robert sat behind his massive desk like a judge, with David Hensley standing beside him holding a leather portfolio. The sight of his wife's lover playing the role of trusted family advisor made Tyler's jaw clench, but he kept his expression neutral. Amanda sat with Dylan on the antique sofa, her hand resting possessively on their son's shoulder. She was dressed in a black dress that Tyler recognized as new and expensive, probably bought with money meant for Dylan's college fund. The thought of her using their son's future to impress her lover added another layer to Tyler's growing rage. "Tyler," Robert began, his voice carrying its usual note of barely concealed disdain, "I've asked you here because these decisions affect your son, though they don't directly concern you." Tyler nodded, saying nothing. He'd learned that Robert interpreted silence as weakness, which suited Tyler's current strategy perfectly. Robert gestured to David, who opened the portfolio with practiced efficiency. "I'm distributing my assets among family members," Robert continued. "Amanda will receive 40% of the business interests in the primary estate. My nephew Charles gets 30% and the vacation properties in Aspen and Nantucket. Dylan will receive 20% in trust, managed by David until he turns 25. Tyler felt something cold settle in his stomach. And the remaining 10%. Robert's smile was cruel. "That goes to David for his years of faithful service to this family. He's been more like a son to me than—" The old man's eyes fixed on Tyler with unmistakable contempt. "More than someone who married into the family for financial gain." The insult hung in the air like smoke. Tyler watched Amanda's face carefully, looking for any sign of surprise or objection. Instead, he saw only a slight nod, as if she'd expected this outcome. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She'd known about this beforehand. She'd probably helped plan it. Furthermore, Robert continued, his voice gaining strength as he delivered what he clearly considered a killing blow. Tyler will receive nothing. As I've always said, he's not really family. He's an outsider who happened to marry my daughter. Dylan, who had been quietly fidgeting beside his mother, suddenly stood up. The 9-year-old reached into his backpack and pulled out a manila folder that looked official and important. Tyler watched in amazement as his son walked directly to Robert's desk. "Grandma told me to give this to you if you ever excluded Dad again," Dylan announced with the simple clarity that only children possessed. Robert's face went from smug satisfaction to confusion as he took the folder. "What are you talking about, boy? Your grandmother has been dead for 3 years. She gave it to me before she got sick," Dylan explained. "She said it was important and that I should keep it safe until I needed it. She said you try to hurt Dad someday because you never understood what made people strong." Tyler watched his father-in-law's face transform as he opened the folder and began reading. Robert's usual ruddy complexion drained to ash gray, and his hands started trembling. David moved closer to read over his shoulder, and Tyler saw the lawyer's confident expression crumble into something approaching terror. "Where did you get this?" Robert whispered, his voice barely audible. Dylan shrugged with 9-year-old indifference. "Grandma's secret safe in her sewing room. She showed me how to open it and told me this was for Dad if you ever tried to be mean to him." Amanda leaned forward, her face showing the first sign of genuine concern Tyler had seen from her in months. "Daddy, what is it?" But Robert couldn't answer. He was staring at the documents in the folder as if they were a death sentence. David had gone completely pale and was backing away from the desk like he'd seen a ghost. Tyler remained seated, watching the drama unfold with growing fascination. Eleanor Grayson had died of cancer when Dylan was 6, but she'd been lucid and sharp until the very end. Tyler had always suspected she saw through her husband's business dealings more clearly than anyone realized. "Well," Tyler said finally, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Are you going to share what my son just delivered, or do I need to have my own lawyers examine it?" The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Robert looked up at Tyler with new eyes, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Whatever was in that folder had shifted the balance of power in the room completely. Tyler smiled slowly, showing teeth. For the first time since entering the Grayson family circle, he held all the cards. Chapter 4. Revelations and Recalculations. The silence in the parlor stretched until Robert finally spoke, his voice hollow and defeated. "Eleanor knew," he whispered. "She knew everything." Tyler rose from his chair and approached the desk with deliberate slowness. Up close, he could see sweat beading on Robert's forehead despite the October chill. "Knew what exactly?" David tried to intervene, his lawyer instincts kicking in despite his obvious panic. "Robert, don't say anything else. We need to review these documents privately and—" "Shut up, David," Tyler said without taking his eyes off his father-in-law. His voice carried a quiet menace that made both older men flinch. "I think we're past the point of legal maneuvering." Robert's hands shook as he spread the documents across his desk. Tyler could see bank statements, legal agreements, and what appeared to be correspondence dating back 15 years. His late mother-in-law had been thorough in her documentation. "The shipping business," Robert began, his voice barely above a whisper. "It was never just shipping. We've been moving other things, taking payments from people who needed discreet transport services. Eleanor found out about the money laundering operation 5 years ago." Amanda gasped from the sofa, but Tyler felt only cold satisfaction. Eleanor Grayson had struck him as too intelligent and observant to be completely ignorant of her husband's activities. The old woman had been playing a longer game than anyone realized. "But that's not the worst part," Robert continued, looking directly at Tyler with something approaching respect for the first time in 7 years. "Eleanor discovered that I'd been skimming from Dylan's trust fund to pay for the operation. Your son's inheritance. I've been using it as collateral for illegal loans. The admission hit Tyler like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. His 9-year-old son had just unknowingly revealed that his grandfather was a criminal who'd been stealing his future. The poetic justice was almost overwhelming. David stepped forward desperately. "Robert, please. We can fix this. The money can be replaced, and the other activities can be—" "Can be what?" Tyler interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Covered up? Forgotten? You think I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that my son's college fund has been funding your criminal enterprise?" He turned to Amanda, who was staring at her father with a mixture of shock and growing understanding. "Did you know about any of this?" Amanda's silence was answer enough. Tyler studied her face and saw not ignorance, but the careful calculation of someone trying to figure out how much damage control was needed. She'd known something, even if not the full extent. "The trust fund can be restored," she said finally, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she used when trying to manipulate him. "Daddy made mistakes, but family forgives family. We can work through this together." Tyler laughed, a sound devoid of humor that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "Family? You mean the family that just declared I wasn't really part of it? The family that's been stealing from my son while treating me like hired help?" Dylan, who had been watching the adult drama with wide eyes, spoke up from the sofa. "Dad, are you mad at Grandpa?" Tyler's expression softened as he looked at his son. "I'm disappointed, Dylan. Very disappointed. But not in you. You did exactly what your grandmother asked you to do." He turned back to Robert and David, his face hardening again. "Here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to transfer 51% ownership of all business assets to me, effective immediately. Consider a compensation for the theft and years of disrespect." "That's impossible," David protested. "The business structure doesn't allow for—" "Then restructure it," Tyler snapped. "You're a lawyer, aren't you? Find a way." "Second, Dylan's trust fund will be restored with 20% interest, and control will transfer to me as his father." Robert found his voice again, some of his old arrogance returning. "And if I refuse, you'll go to the authorities? Your son would lose everything if this business is destroyed." Tyler's smile was predatory. "Who said anything about the authorities? I'm a construction worker, Robert. I know how to make problems disappear permanently. And unlike you, I don't leave evidence lying around for family members to find." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Tyler had learned violence in the military and refined it through years of dealing with difficult subcontractors and union disputes. Both Robert and David understood they were no longer dealing with a respectful son-in-law who had tolerated years of condescension. Amanda stood up abruptly, her face flushed with anger. "Tyler, you can't threaten my father. This is still his house, his business." "His criminal enterprise," Tyler corrected. "And threatening? I'm simply explaining the natural consequences of betraying someone like me. Your father understands, don't you, Robert?" Robert nodded slowly, finally recognizing the steel beneath Tyler's working-class exterior. Eleanor had seen it years ago and prepared accordingly. She'd known her husband would eventually push too far and had given her grandson the tools to protect his father. "There's one more condition," Tyler added, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "David resigns from all positions related to this family and its business, effective immediately. His services are no longer required." David's face went white as he realized the implications. Without the Grayson account, his law practice would collapse within months. More importantly, his connection to Amanda would be severed permanently. Tyler glanced at his wife, who was staring at David with panic in her eyes. She was beginning to understand that her carefully constructed double life was crumbling around her. The game had changed completely, and Tyler was no longer playing defense. Chapter 5. The Web Titans. 3 days after the inheritance meeting, Tyler sat in his home office reviewing the legal documents that would transfer control of the Grayson Empire to him. David had been forced to draft the papers under threat of exposure, his hands shaking as he signed away everything Robert had spent decades building. But Tyler's real focus was on the evidence he'd been gathering about Amanda's betrayal. The folder from Eleanor had contained more than just proof of Robert's crimes. Hidden among the financial documents were photographs, Amanda and David at various hotels over the past 2 years, time-stamped and dated with Eleanor's meticulous handwriting. The old woman had been documenting the affair long before Tyler had discovered it, preparing for this moment with surgical precision. Tyler's phone buzzed with a text from one of his construction foremen. The message was simple: package delivered as requested. Tyler smiled grimly as he deleted the message. The first phase of his revenge was now in motion. Amanda entered the office without knocking, her face tight with stress. She'd been trying to reach David all morning, but Tyler had made sure the lawyer would be unavailable for the foreseeable future. David was currently dealing with a sudden inspection from the State Bar Association, triggered by an anonymous tip about ethical violations. The inspection would find exactly what Tyler had arranged for them to find. "We need to talk," Amanda said, closing the door behind her. She was wearing one of her designer outfits, but Tyler could see the strain around her eyes, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought he wasn't looking. "About what?" Tyler asked without looking up from his papers. He wanted her to feel insignificant, unworthy of his full attention. "About what happened with my father. About the business transfer." She moved closer to his desk, her voice taking on the seductive tone she'd once used to manipulate him. "Tyler, I know we've had our problems, but we're still a team. We can use this opportunity to build something amazing together." Tyler finally looked up, his gray eyes cold and emotionless. "We? There is no we, Amanda. There's me, cleaning up the mess your family created, and there's you, pretending you didn't know about any of it." Amanda's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculation beneath. "What do you mean by that?" Instead of answering, Tyler opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. The video showed Amanda and David in what appeared to be Dylan's bedroom at the family cabin, their bodies intertwined on the small bed where Tyler's son had once slept peacefully. Amanda's face went white as she recognized the footage. "Where did you get this?" "I've been documenting your activities for months," Tyler said matter-of-factly. Eleanor wasn't the only one preparing for this moment. "The question is, what were you planning to do after you and David destroy my family?" The video continued playing, showing intimate moments between Amanda and her lover, their whispered conversations about getting rid of Tyler and taking Dylan away from his corrupting influence. Tyler watched his wife's face crumble as she realized how thoroughly she'd been exposed. "It's not what it looks like," she whispered, the lie automatic and pathetic. Tyler stood up slowly, his 6'2" frame towering over her. "It's exactly what it looks like. You've been planning to take my son away from me while stealing everything I've worked for. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Did you think I was that weak?" Amanda backed toward the door, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Tyler, please. We can work this out. I made mistakes, but I love you. I love our family. Love." Tyler's laugh was harsh and bitter. "You love your father's money and David's promises about your future together. You love the idea of being wealthy without having to work for it. But you've never loved me, and you sure as hell don't love Dylan enough to protect him from your selfishness." He moved around the desk, backing her against the door. "Here's what's going to happen, Amanda. You're going to pack your things and leave this house tonight. You'll take nothing except the clothes you can carry, and you'll never contact Dylan without my permission." "You can't take my son away from me," she protested, her voice rising with panic. "I'm his mother. I have rights." Tyler's smile was predatory. "Rights? You mean like the right to commit adultery in your child's bed? Like the right to plan his kidnapping with your lover? I have hours of video and audio recordings that show exactly what kind of mother you really are." He opened another file on his laptop, showing bank records of Amanda's secret credit cards and hidden accounts. "I also have evidence of the money you've been stealing from our joint accounts to fund your affair. David's hotel bills, your jewelry purchases, even the abortion you had 6 months ago when you thought the baby might not be mine." Amanda's knees nearly buckled. The abortion had been her deepest secret, the moment when she'd chosen her affair over any possibility of rebuilding her marriage. Tyler had known all along, had been planning this confrontation with methodical precision. "Get out," Tyler said quietly. "Get out before I do something we'll both regret." Amanda fumbled for the door handle, tears streaming down her face. "What about David? What did you do to him? Tyler's expression didn't change. David is learning that there are consequences for betraying the wrong person. By tomorrow morning, he'll be disbarred, divorced, and financially ruined. His wife deserves better than a cheating husband, don't you think? As Amanda fled the room, Tyler returned to his desk and opened another file on his computer. Phase 1 was complete, Amanda was out of his house, and David was neutralized. But Phase 2 would be even more satisfying. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd memorized weeks ago. When the voice answered, Tyler's smile was cold and calculating. "It's time," he said simply. "Execute Phase 2. Chapter 6, Checkmate." The next morning brought news that spread through the elite social circles like wildfire. David Hensley had been found in his office at 3 a.m., frantically shredding documents and trying to transfer money to offshore accounts. Unfortunately for him, federal agents had been waiting in his office since midnight, alerted by an anonymous tip about money laundering activities connected to the Grayson shipping business. Tyler watched the news coverage from his construction site office, Dylan sitting beside him eating breakfast before school. His son seemed remarkably unaffected by his mother's sudden departure, which told Tyler everything he needed to know about Amanda's level of involvement in Dylan's life. "Dad," Dylan said between bites of cereal, "is Mom coming back?" Tyler studied his son's face, looking for signs of distress or confusion. Instead, he saw the same clear-eyed intelligence that Eleanor Grayson had possessed. "Do you want her to come back?" Dylan considered the question seriously. "I don't know. She's been sad a lot lately, and she gets angry when you're not around. Maybe she needs to figure out how to be happy again." The wisdom in his 9-year-old son's words struck Tyler like a physical blow. Dylan had been watching his parents' marriage disintegrate and had somehow understood that his mother's unhappiness was destroying their family. Eleanor had chosen her ally well. Tyler's phone buzzed with a call from his lawyer. The federal investigation into the Grayson shipping business had moved with unusual speed, suggesting that someone had provided law enforcement with detailed evidence and documentation. Robert would be arrested within hours, his empire crumbling as investigators froze assets and seized records. But Tyler's revenge was far from complete. He'd spent weeks setting up the next phase, using his construction company's resources and connections to ensure maximum damage to everyone who had betrayed him. Amanda appeared at the construction site just after noon, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and desperate. She'd been staying in a cheap motel since leaving the house, her credit cards frozen by federal investigators looking into the money laundering operation. Tyler watched her approach through his office window, noting the way his workers stopped what they were doing to stare at the clearly out-of-place woman in designer clothes. "Tyler, please," she begged when he finally allowed her into his office. "David's been arrested, Daddy's going to prison, and the lawyers say I might be charged as an accessory. You have to help me. I'm Dylan's mother." Tyler leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same cold assessment he'd use on a building foundation that was about to collapse. "Help you? After everything you've done?" "I know I made mistakes," Amanda continued, desperation making her voice shrill. "But I was confused, lonely. You were never home, always working. David offered me attention, made me feel special. It didn't mean anything." "It meant everything," Tyler corrected. "It meant you were willing to destroy our family for a few moments of feeling special. It meant you were willing to let your father steal from our son while you played house with another man." He stood up and moved to the window, looking out at his construction crew. These were honest men who worked hard for their families, who understood loyalty and commitment. "You want to know the difference between you and them? They know what they have, and they protect it. You threw away everything real for something fake." Amanda moved closer, her hand reaching for his arm. "Tyler, I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make this right. I'll sign any papers you want, give you full custody, anything. Just don't let them destroy me completely." Tyler turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Destroy you? Amanda, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure there were consequences." He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. "Your divorce papers. I'm offering you a choice. Sign them now and walk away with a small settlement. Or fight me in court and lose everything while the federal investigation expands to include your role in the money laundering." Amanda's face crumbled as she realized the extent of Tyler's planning. You orchestrated all of this. The investigation, David's arrest, everything. I provided law enforcement with evidence of crimes that were actually committed, Tyler clarified. Your father chose to become a criminal. David chose to help him. You chose to betray your family. I just made sure the truth came to light. 2 years had passed since Tyler's divorce, and Dylan was thriving in his new life. The 11-year-old had grown taller and stronger, showing early signs of inheriting his father's physical presence and mental toughness. His grades were excellent, his friendships healthy, and his relationship with Tyler had deepened into something approaching genuine partnership. Amanda, meanwhile, had descended into a spiral of poverty and desperation that Tyler monitored with clinical detachment. She'd been forced to declare bankruptcy after failing to find stable employment. Her reputation in the business community thoroughly destroyed by Tyler's methodical campaign. She was currently working night shifts at a factory outside the city, living in a studio apartment that Tyler's investigators described as barely habitable. Tyler felt no sympathy for her suffering. In his worldview, consequences were earned through choices, and Amanda was simply experiencing the natural result of her betrayal. But Tyler wasn't satisfied with her mere poverty. He wanted her complete destruction, the kind of total defeat that would serve as a permanent reminder of what happened to those who crossed him. The opportunity for final revenge came through an unexpected source, David Hensley's ex-wife, Patricia. The woman had contacted Tyler through his lawyer, requesting a private meeting to discuss matters of mutual interest. Tyler agreed, curious about what the disgraced attorney's former wife might want from him. Patricia Hensley was a refined woman in her late 40s, her graying hair styled elegantly despite the obvious financial strain of her divorce. She met Tyler at an upscale restaurant, her nervous energy suggesting she was about to propose something significant. "Mr. Brooks," she began after they'd ordered, "I want to thank you for what you did to my husband. I know that sounds strange, but discovering David's affair was actually a blessing. It freed me from a marriage that had been alive for years." Tyler studied her carefully, noting the intelligence in her eyes and the steel beneath her polite demeanor. "What do you want, Mrs. Hensley?" "It's Patricia now. I've taken back my maiden name. And what I want is justice for both of us." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "David has been writing letters to Amanda from prison. Love letters, promising her that he'll wait for her, that they'll be together when he gets out." Tyler felt his jaw tighten. The idea of David and Amanda maintaining their relationship despite everything that had happened was intolerable. "How do you know about the letters?" "Because I still receive his legal correspondence. We're not divorced yet, just separated pending the completion of his sentence. The prison officials copy me on everything he sends or receives." Patricia smiled coldly. "David thinks he's been clever, but I've been documenting every communication." She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick envelope. Copies of every letter he's sent to Amanda over the past 18 months. They discuss plans for when he's released, where they'll live, how they'll start over together. But more importantly, they discuss Dylan. Tyler's blood ran cold. "What about Dylan?" "They plan to take him," Patricia said quietly. "Not kidnapping, exactly, but they want to convince him that you're the villain who destroyed his family. David has been researching ways to challenge your custody, claiming that your methods of obtaining the divorce were illegal or coercive." The envelope felt heavy in Tyler's hands as he opened it and began reading. David's handwriting was precise and lawyerly, but the emotions behind the words were clear. He genuinely believed he and Amanda were victims of Tyler's vindictive persecution, and he was planning to help her reclaim her son once his sentence was complete. "Why are you showing me this?" Tyler asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Because I want David to suffer the way I suffered when I discovered his betrayal," Patricia replied, her voice hardening. "He destroyed our family for a fantasy, and I want that fantasy to become a nightmare. Will you help me?" Tyler studied the woman across from him, recognizing a kindred spirit in her desire for complete revenge. "What did you have in mind?" Patricia's smile was predatory. "David gets out in 5 years. Amanda is barely surviving on her current salary, but she's holding on to hope that David will save her when he's released. What if we made sure that hope turned into the most devastating disappointment possible? She outlined her plan with the precision of someone who had been thinking about revenge for months. Tyler would use his connections to monitor Amanda's communications and movements, while Patricia would feed David false information about Amanda's loyalty and devotion. When David was finally released, he would discover that the woman he'd been dreaming about had moved on completely, leaving him with nothing. But the real blow, Patricia continued, will be when David realizes that Amanda never loved him at all. She was using him to get access to family money and social status. When those things disappeared, so did her interest in him. Tyler considered the proposal carefully. It was elaborate, requiring years of careful manipulation, but the psychological impact would be devastating. David would lose not only his freedom and career, but also his faith in the one relationship he believed had made his sacrifices worthwhile. "There's one modification I'd like to make," Tyler said finally. "Dylan needs to understand who his mother really is, not just that she chose poorly. I want him to see the evidence of her manipulation and selfishness so he never doubts that I made the right choice in protecting him." Patricia nodded approvingly. A son should know the truth about his parents. David's daughters certainly learned the truth about their father. They shook hands across the table, sealing an alliance built on mutual desire for complete destruction of their betrayers. Tyler felt a familiar sense of satisfaction as he imagined David's face when he finally understood that his 5-year sentence had been only the beginning of his punishment. Tyler Brooks had built his life on the principle that betrayal demanded absolute consequences. Now, he had a partner who understood that principle just as clearly as he did. Chapter 9. Perfect Justice. 5 years later, Tyler stood in the main office of Brooks Industries, the empire he'd built from the ruins of the Grayson shipping business. Dylan, now 16 and nearly as tall as his father, was reviewing college applications at the conference table. The boy had inherited Tyler's work ethic and intelligence, earning straight A's while also excelling in athletics and leadership activities. The final phase of Tyler's revenge was reaching its conclusion. David Hensley had been released from prison 6 months ago, emerging to discover that the world he'd left behind had been completely transformed. His law license was permanently revoked, his assets seized, and his reputation destroyed beyond repair. More devastatingly, Amanda was gone. Patricia Hensley had executed her part of their plan with artistic precision. Through careful manipulation of David's correspondence and strategic leaks of information, she'd convinced the imprisoned attorney that Amanda was waiting faithfully for his return. David had spent 5 years writing love letters to a woman who had stopped reading them after the first year. She reached for the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the divorce settlement terms. Tyler was offering her $50,000 and her personal belongings, a fraction of what she might have claimed in a normal divorce, but more than she'd have after legal fees and potential criminal charges. "If I sign this, what happens to Dylan?" Tyler's expression softened slightly when he mentioned his son. "Dylan stays with me. You can have supervised visitation once a month, assuming you stay out of trouble and prove you can be stable. He deserves better than watching his mother chase after men who make empty promises." Amanda signed the papers with tears streaming down her face, her designer pen scratching across the documents that ended her marriage and sealed her fate. Tyler watched without emotion, feeling only the cold satisfaction of a job completed thoroughly. As she prepared to leave, Amanda turned back one final time. What if I had chosen differently? What if I had ended the affair and tried to save our marriage? Tyler considered the question seriously. Then we wouldn't be here. But you didn't choose differently, Amanda. You chose to betray the people who loved you most. That choice has consequences. After she left, Tyler called Dylan's school to arrange early pickup. His son deserved to hear about the divorce from his father, not from playground gossip or news reports. As he drove to the school, Tyler felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Peace. The war was over, and he had won completely. Chapter 7. Rebuilding from Ashes. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Tyler stood in the master bedroom of what had once been the Grayson estate, now legally his property through the business acquisition. The federal investigation had resulted in Robert receiving a 15-year sentence for money laundering and tax evasion. David had plea bargained for 7 years in exchange for his testimony, his law practice destroyed, and his wife successfully filing for divorce with evidence of his infidelity. Dylan was adjusting well to their new living situation, though Tyler had been careful to remove any reminders of the room's previous owners. The boy had started therapy to help process his parents' divorce, but he seemed remarkably resilient. His relationship with Tyler had grown stronger through the ordeal, built on honesty and mutual respect rather than the conditional love he'd received from his mother and grandfather. Amanda had violated the terms of their divorce agreement within 3 months, attempting to contact Dylan directly through social media and trying to turn him against Tyler with sob stories about how his father had ruined her life. Tyler had responded by having her supervised visitation rights revoked entirely, a decision the family court judge supported after reviewing the evidence of her continued manipulation attempts. Tyler's construction business had expanded rapidly with the addition of the shipping company's legitimate assets. He'd sold off the properties connected to illegal activities and used the proceeds to establish a college fund for Dylan that dwarfed what Robert had originally intended. More importantly, Tyler had complete control over every aspect of his and his son's lives for the first time since his marriage began. But Tyler wasn't finished with his revenge. Amanda had found work as a real estate agent in a neighboring city, trying to rebuild her life with a modest apartment and a 10-year-old sedan. She'd attempted to date several men, but Tyler's reputation and connections in the business community made it difficult for her to find anyone willing to risk association with the ex-wife of someone known for his ruthless response to betrayal. Tyler had been patient, but tonight marked the completion of the final phase of his plan. He discovered that Amanda was planning to leave the state, taking a job offer in California where she hoped to start fresh. Tyler couldn't allow her to escape the consequences of her actions so easily. His phone buzzed with a text message, "Package delivered as requested." Tyler smiled as he read the words, knowing that Amanda was about to discover that geography wouldn't protect her from the reputation she'd earned. The package was a comprehensive dossier that Tyler's private investigator had delivered to Amanda's new employer, a detailed account of her role in her family's criminal enterprise, her affair that destroyed her marriage, and her subsequent attempts to manipulate her own child against his father. The California real estate firm would withdraw their job offer by morning, and Amanda's references would ensure that no reputable company would hire her in the future. Tyler had also arranged for Amanda's landlord to receive evidence of her mounting debts and unstable employment history. Her lease would be terminated within the week, forcing her back to staying in cheap motels while she searched for work that would never materialize. Dylan entered the master bedroom, carrying his homework and settling into the reading chair by the window. Tyler had made sure his son felt comfortable in every room of their new home, erasing the memories of his grandfather's dominance and his mother's betrayal. "Dad," Dylan said, looking up from his math problems. "Mrs. Peterson at school asked if I miss Mom. I told her I missed the mom I thought I had, but not the mom she really was. Was that okay to say?" Tyler set down the business documents he'd been reviewing and moved to sit on the edge of the chair. His son's emotional intelligence continued to amaze him, the boy's ability to articulate complex feelings with simple honesty. "That was very wise," Tyler said seriously. "People change, and sometimes we have to accept that the person we loved isn't the person they became. It's okay to miss what we thought we had while being glad we don't have to live with the reality." Dylan nodded and returned to his homework, the conversation complete in the way that only children could manage. Tyler watched his son work, feeling a fierce protectiveness that burned like fire in his chest. Anyone who threatened Dylan's happiness or security would face the same methodical destruction that Tyler had visited upon Amanda, David, and Robert. Tyler's phone rang with a call from his foreman. The latest construction project was ahead of schedule and under budget, a testament to the quality of work that Tyler demanded from his crews. Success was the best revenge against those who had dismissed him as unworthy, but it was also the foundation for the empire he was building for Dylan's future. As he discussed project details with his foreman, Tyler caught sight of himself in the bedroom mirror. The man looking back was harder than the one who had married Amanda 8 years ago, scarred by betrayal but strengthened by victory. He'd learned that mercy was a luxury he couldn't afford when it came to protecting his family. The phone call ended, and Tyler returned to his documents. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight he was content to sit with his son in the house that had once belonged to his enemies, planning the future he'd built from the ashes of their destruction. Tyler Brooks had never been one to forgive or forget, and tonight that fact brought him complete peace. Chapter 8. The Hunter's Patience. Tyler had arranged for Amanda to meet Marcus Webb, a wealthy widower who owned a chain of restaurants in Arizona. Marcus was lonely, generous, and completely unaware of Amanda's history. Tyler had made sure Amanda appeared to be a charming divorcee looking for a fresh start, and the relationship had developed exactly as Tyler had predicted. Amanda had married Marcus within 18 months and moved to Phoenix, where she was now living the comfortable lifestyle she'd always craved. She rarely mentioned her first marriage or her son, telling Marcus only that her ex-husband had been controlling and that custody issues made contact with Dylan complicated. Dylan knew the truth about his mother's new life through private investigators Tyler employed to monitor the situation. The teenager had processed the information with the same clear-eyed pragmatism he'd shown as a child, understanding that his mother had chosen wealth and comfort over any relationship with her son. "She's not a bad person," Dylan had told Tyler after learning about Amanda's remarriage. "She's just weak. She needs someone to take care of her, and Marcus does that better than you ever could. It's probably better for everyone." Tyler was proud of his son's emotional maturity, though he suspected Dylan had inherited Eleanor Grayson's ability to see through people's pretenses. The boy understood that his mother was fundamentally selfish, choosing the path of least resistance regardless of who got hurt. David's release from prison had been carefully orchestrated to maximize his psychological destruction. Tyler had arranged for him to be picked up by a private investigator who delivered the news about Amanda's remarriage along with photographs of her new life. David's reaction had been captured on video, complete emotional collapse as he realized that his 5-year sacrifice had been for nothing. Patricia had been waiting at David's apartment when he arrived, serving him with final divorce papers and eviction notices. She'd spent the prison years rebuilding her life and moving their daughters across the country, ensuring that David would have no family connections to sustain him through his downfall. "He's currently living in a homeless shelter downtown," Patricia reported during her final meeting with Tyler. "He applied for work at several factories and grocery stores, but his criminal record makes him unemployable for anything except manual labor. His daughters have refused all contact, and his former law partners won't return his calls." Tyler felt the deep satisfaction of a plan executed to perfection. David had lost everything: his career, his family, his freedom, and finally his hope. The man who had helped destroy Tyler's marriage was now experiencing the same isolation and desperation that Tyler had once felt, but without the strength and resources to fight back. "Dad," Dylan said from the conference table, looking up from his college applications, "I got into Stanford early admission." Tyler smiled, feeling genuine pride in his son's accomplishments. Dylan had earned this success through his own effort and intelligence, building on the foundation Tyler had provided, but creating his own path forward. "That's excellent news. Are you sure that's where you want to go?" Dylan nodded confidently. "I want to study business and engineering, maybe take over the company someday. But I also want to understand how people like Grandpa and David justify their choices to themselves. Psychology might be useful for recognizing threats before they become problems." Tyler felt a chill of recognition as he heard his own strategic thinking reflected in his son's words. Dylan was becoming the kind of man who could protect himself and his family from betrayal, someone who understood that forgiveness was often just another word for weakness. "What about your mother?" Tyler asked carefully. "Do you want to reach out to her about college? Maybe let her know about Stanford?" Dylan considered the question seriously before shaking his head. "She made her choice when she picked Marcus over staying connected to me. I don't need her approval or her money. Besides, She might try to use my success to make herself look good to her new family. Tyler nodded approvingly. His son had learned the most important lesson of all, that trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired. Dylan would be generous and loyal to those who earned it, but ruthless toward anyone who betrayed him. As the sun set over the city Tyler now dominated, he reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. Robert Grayson was serving the final years of his sentence, broken by the loss of everything he'd built. David Hensley was homeless and hopeless, destroyed by his own choices and Tyler's patient revenge. Amanda had gotten what she'd always wanted, a wealthy husband and comfortable life, but at the cost of losing her son forever. Tyler had won completely, but more importantly, he'd built something lasting. Brooks Industries would provide Dylan with the resources and power to protect himself against future threats. The lessons Tyler had learned through betrayal and revenge would ensure that his son never suffered the same vulnerabilities. Tyler Brooks had never learned to forgive, and he never would. In his experience, forgiveness was what weak people called their inability to demand justice. He'd chosen a different path, one that led to complete victory over everyone who had ever underestimated him. As Dylan gathered his college applications and headed upstairs to his room, Tyler remained in the office, planning the next phase of his empire's expansion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight he was content with the knowledge that he'd built a legacy that would protect his family for generations. The boy who'd grown up in a trailer park had become a man who owned the mansion, the business, and the power to destroy anyone who threatened what he'd built. And Dylan would inherit not just the wealth, but the knowledge of how to keep it. Tyler Brooks had learned that in a world full of betrayers and users, the only safety came from being strong enough to make them all pay. It was a lesson he'd pass on to his son, along with everything else he'd fought to build. The war was over, and Tyler had won everything that mattered. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Hello, and welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're grateful for each view and comment. Tell us, from which country or city are you watching today? We enjoy connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Left Behind. Vince Harlow watched as the cloud of dust rose behind his wife's retreating SUV, her laughter still ringing in his ears. The blazing Nevada sun beat down on his face as he stood alone on the desolate stretch of highway, miles from the nearest town. Let's see if your survival skills pay off. Melody had yelled, her blonde hair whipping in the wind as she sped away with her photographer friend Trent. The smirk on Trent's face told Vince everything he needed to know. Vince didn't panic. Instead, he reached into his boot and pulled out a small device, a GPS tracker he'd planted on his own vehicle weeks ago when he first noticed the way Melody's eyes lingered on Trent during their dinner parties. The small screen displayed a blinking dot moving steadily eastward. The desert stretched endlessly around him, shimmering under the brutal heat. To anyone else, this might be a death sentence. But Vince wasn't anyone else. Before founding his high-end survival school, Phantom Ridge Expeditions, Vince had spent 8 years in the Army Rangers, including 3 tours in environments far more hostile than this. The desert was practically his second home. He'd built his reputation and fortune teaching billionaires and celebrities how to survive in it. Melody had been one of his clients 3 years ago, an aspiring adventure influencer looking to boost her following with authentic survival content. She'd been captivating with her quick wit and seemingly genuine interest in his world. Their whirlwind romance had culminated in marriage just 6 months later. Now, it appeared that romance had been as authentic as her social media persona. Vince pulled out his satellite phone, the one Melody didn't know about, and dialed a familiar number. "Dom," he said when the line connected. "It's happening. Are you in position?" "Roger that," came the gruff reply from Dominic Alvarez, his former Ranger teammate and current head of security at Phantom Ridge. "You okay out there, boss?" "Never better," Vince replied, surveying the landscape. She even picked the perfect spot. We're about 2 miles from Outpost 3. Cold-blooded, Dom commented. You want me to intercept them? No. Follow the plan. Let them think they've won for now. I'll make my way to the outpost and prep everything. You monitor their position and be ready with the chopper when I give the signal. 3 hours later, as the sun began its westward descent, Vince stood atop a rocky outcropping and watched as a sleek black helicopter appeared on the horizon. Right on schedule, he'd spent the time preparing at Outpost 3, one of 5 hidden facilities he maintained throughout the region for his survival courses. This particular outpost was off all official records, known only to him and Dom. The helicopter touched down in a swirl of dust. Dom emerged, his muscular frame silhouetted against the setting sun, carrying a satellite phone. It's her, Dom said, handing him the device. Car broke down about 40 miles east of here. She sounds desperate. Vince took the phone, his face revealing nothing as he heard his wife's voice, cracking with fake tears. Vince? Vince, is that you? Thank God. We're lost. The car broke down, and there's no one around for miles. I'm so sorry, baby. I was just trying to teach you a lesson. Please help us. I know. Vince replied calmly, his voice devoid of emotion. I tracked you. Help is coming. Oh, thank you. I'm so sorry And Melody? Vince interrupted. You should know who's coming for you. What do you mean? Her voice suddenly tense. Remember Preston Rhodes? The name hung in the air between them. Preston Rhodes, the ex-military contractor Vince had introduced her to last year. The man who'd become obsessed with Melody, sending her increasingly disturbing messages until Vince had been forced to intervene. The man who'd sworn vengeance on them both. That's not funny, Vince, Melody stammered, her voice suddenly small. Preston is in prison. Not anymore, Vince lied smoothly. He made parole 3 weeks ago, and when I mentioned that my wife might be stranded in his territory, well, he seemed very eager to help. Through the phone, he could hear her panicked breathing. You're lying, she whispered. Am I? I guess you'll find out soon enough. Vince ended the call and turned to Dom, whose eyebrows had shot up. Rhodes? Man, that's cold. She'll be terrified. Good, Vince replied, his eyes hard as the desert stones beneath his feet. Fear is the beginning of wisdom, and she has a lot to learn. What Melody didn't know was that Preston Rhodes was indeed still in prison. But the fear he'd just planted would be just the first step in his carefully orchestrated plan, a plan he'd been developing for months as he gathered evidence of his wife's betrayal. Let's move, Vince said, checking his watch. We have work to do. Chapter 2, The Spider's Web. 6 months earlier, Vince sat in his home office, staring at the screen of Melody's tablet. She had left it behind when rushing to an emergency photo shoot with Trent. The tablet she'd asked him not to touch because it contained surprise anniversary plans. The same tablet that had just received a message that flashed across the screen before disappearing. What are you telling him? We can't keep waiting forever. I need you. All of you. Something in Vince's gut tightened. The message was gone in an instant, but the sender's name had been clear. Trent Westlake, the ruggedly handsome adventure photographer who'd been hanging around Melody for the past few months, supposedly collaborating on her social media presence. Vince didn't immediately confront her. That wasn't his style. Instead, he began watching, observing, planning. He hired a private investigator who documented dozens of meetings between Melody and Trent at a luxury hotel on the outskirts of Vegas. He installed hidden cameras in their home, capturing whispered late-night phone calls when she thought he was asleep. He documented every lie, every deception, every betrayal. But the true nature of their plot only became clear when he hacked into Melody's private email account and discovered correspondence with his company's attorney discussing the contingency plans for transferring ownership of Phantom Ridge expeditions in the event of Vince's unfortunate accident. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning to kill him. That night, Vince made a phone call to someone he hadn't spoken to in years. Faye, it's me. His sister's voice was thick with sleep, but instantly alert. Vince? Is everything okay? It's 3 a.m. You were right about her, he said simply. A long pause followed. Faye had warned him about Melody from the beginning, sensing something performative in her affection. That warning had caused a rift between them that had lasted years. "I'm so sorry, Vince," she finally said. "What happened? It's worse than you thought. I need your help." In the weeks that followed, Vince and Faye reconnected as they built his counter-strategy. Faye, with her background in cybersecurity, helped him secure his finances and business holdings, creating a complex web of protections that would activate the moment anyone tried to transfer ownership of Phantom Ridge. Meanwhile, Vince continued playing the role of the oblivious husband, even as he methodically prepared for every contingency. He deployed GPS trackers, installed backdoor access to their vehicle's computer systems, and established a network of hidden caches and safe houses throughout the desert region where he operated. He noted how Melody began suggesting they take more adventurous trips together, always in remote locations with treacherous terrain. He cataloged how she began asking detailed questions about his will and life insurance. And he observed how Trent kept appearing at their social events, his eyes following Melody with barely concealed hunger. "Why are you going along with this wilderness trip if you know what they're planning?" Faye asked him over an encrypted call the night before he was due to leave with Melody. "Because I need to catch them in the act," Vince explained. "If I confront her now, she'll just deny everything. I need irrefutable evidence." "This is dangerous, Vince. They could actually kill you." "They could try," he replied, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that reminded Faye of their father. "But I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. The desert doesn't forgive mistakes, and neither do I." Now, as he stood at Outpost 3 preparing his equipment, Vince reflected on how perfectly his wife and her lover had played into his hands. They had chosen this specific route because Vince had casually mentioned it contained some of the most dangerous and isolated terrain in his territory. They had no idea he maintained a hidden facility there, fully stocked with everything he would need. "Dom," he said as his friend finished securing the helicopter, "make sure the cameras are operational. I want every moment of this recorded." "Already done," Dom confirmed. "Are you sure you don't want me to just bring them in? Let the authorities handle this." Vince checked the edge on his tactical knife before returning it to its sheath. "The authorities would give them a trial. I have something else in mind." He pulled up the tracker's display, showing Melody and Trent's location. The dot was stationary now, exactly where their vehicle had supposedly broken down. In reality, Vince had remotely triggered a kill switch in the SUV's computer system, rendering it completely inoperable. "It's time," he said, his face hard as the desert stone. "Let them stew for another hour, then move in with the chopper. Tell them I sent you to rescue them. Bring them to Outpost 5. Not here. No, I've prepared something special at 5. Dom nodded, knowing better than to ask for details. In their Ranger days, Vince had been legendary for his psychological warfare tactics against captured enemies. Whatever he had planned for Melody and Trent, Dom almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Chapter 3, Mirage. The sun had nearly set by the time Dom's helicopter appeared on the horizon. Melody Harlow stood beside the disabled SUV. Her once perfect makeup streaked with tears, her designer adventure were coated with a fine layer of dust. Beside her, Trent Westlake paced nervously, constantly checking his phone despite the absence of signal. "He's coming," Melody said, relief flooding her voice as she spotted the approaching aircraft. "I told you Vince would help us." Trent snorted. "After you abandoned him in the desert? He's probably bringing the police." "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped. "Vince would never involve authorities. Bad publicity for his precious company." She paused, her expression darkening, though he did say something strange about Preston Rhodes. "Ooh, never mind," she said, waving dismissively. "Just let me do the talking. Vince still loves me. I can handle him." The helicopter touched down 50 yards away, sending swirls of sand in all directions. Melody plastered on her most remorseful expression as Dom emerged and approached them. "Mrs. Harlow," he shouted over the whirring blades. "I'm here to extract you. Mr. Harlow sent me." "Where is Vince?" she asked, looking past Dom toward the helicopter. "Handling preparations at the outpost," Dom replied vaguely. "We need to move. Storm's coming in." The sky above was perfectly clear, but neither Melody nor Trent possessed the desert knowledge to challenge this assessment. They gathered their essentials and followed Dom to the helicopter. "Where are we going?" Trent asked as they lifted off. "Secure location," Dom answered, his voice neutral. "Mr. Harlow's orders." Melody exchanged a nervous glance with Trent. This wasn't proceeding according to their plan. Vince was supposed to be devastated, desperate to reconnect with her after her teaching him a lesson. Instead, he was dispatching employees and making mysterious preparations. As the helicopter flew deeper into the desert, Melody tried to orient herself, but the featureless landscape offered few landmarks. After 20 minutes, a small compound appeared below them, a series of partially subterranean structures built into the side of a rocky hill. "What is this place?" she asked as they descended. "Outpost 5, Dom replied. "One of Mr. Harlow's private facilities." The helicopter landed on a small pad at the edge of the compound. Dom escorted them inside, where the temperature was a blessed reprieve from the desert heat. The interior was Spartan but well-equipped. Sleeping quarters, a kitchen area, communications equipment, and various survival gear lining the walls. "Make yourselves comfortable," Dom said, gesturing to the main living area. "Mr. Harlow will be here soon." "When?" Melody demanded. "When he's ready." Dom's tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate further. "There's food in the kitchen, water in the cooler. The bathroom is through that door. Do not attempt to leave the facility. The desert will kill you faster than you can imagine." With that, he turned and left, the sound of the helicopter's engines spooling up moments later. "I don't like this," Trent muttered once they were alone. "This wasn't the plan." "Plans change," Melody hissed. "We can adapt. You said he'd be desperate to get you back, that we'd have the perfect opportunity to stage the accident at the rescue point. This doesn't feel like a man who's desperate for anything." Melody paced the room, her mind racing. Something was wrong. Vince wasn't following the script she'd carefully crafted. The mention of Preston Rhodes continued to unnerve her. "We need to get out of here," Trent decided, moving toward the communications console. "Call for another ride." He pressed several buttons, but the equipment remained dark. "It's dead," he reported. "Or disabled." Melody pulled out her phone. Still no signal. She moved to the door Dom had exited through, only to find it locked. "What the hell?" A sudden crackle came from speakers mounted in the ceiling, followed by Vince's voice, calm and measured. "Hello, Melody." "Trent, I hope you're finding Outpost 5 comfortable." Melody whirled, searching for cameras but seeing none. "Vince? What's going on? Where are you?" "I'm exactly where you left me," he replied. "But don't worry about me. I'm quite comfortable. More importantly, I'm exactly where I need to be." "Baby, I'm so sorry about what happened," Melody began, her voice taking on the contrite tone she'd rehearsed. "It was a stupid joke that went too far. Trent and I were just planning my disappearance." Vince interrupted, his voice hardening. "Staging an accident so you could claim my company? Or were you referring to the affair you've been having for the past 8 months? The blood drained from Melody's face. Beside her, Trent stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she tried, but her voice lacked conviction. "The fascinating thing about the desert," Vince continued as if she hadn't spoken, "is how it strips away pretense. Out here, there's no audience to perform for, no followers to impress. Just the brutal truth of who you really are and what you're capable of." A hidden panel on the wall slid open, revealing a screen that flickered to life. On it appeared photos of Melody and Trent together in various compromising positions, followed by screenshots of emails discussing Phantom Ridge's ownership transfer after the unfortunate incident. "You've been spying on me?" Melody gasped, outrage replacing her fear. "I prefer to think of it as gathering intelligence on hostile forces," Vince replied, "a skill I learned long before we met." "What do you want?" Trent asked, speaking directly to the ceiling. "What I want," Vince said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is for you both to experience the desert as I have, to understand its power, its justice. Over the next few days, I'm going to give you a personalized survival course, one you'll never forget." The lights in the facility suddenly went out, plunging them into darkness. Lesson 1. Vince's voice came through the darkness. Begins now. Chapter 4. Prey. Trent Westlake awoke to darkness and the taste of blood in his mouth. His head throbbed where he'd struck it when the lights went out, and some kind of gas had filled the room, rendering both him and Melody unconscious. Now, as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he realized he was no longer in the outpost facility. He was outside, lying on hard-packed desert sand under a star-filled sky. A few yards away, Melody was stirring, groaning as she regained consciousness. "Melody," he whispered urgently. "Wake up." She rolled over, disoriented. "What? Where are we?" "I don't know, but we're not in the outpost anymore." They both struggled to their feet, taking inventory. Their phones were gone, as were their watches and belts. They wore only the clothes they'd had on when the helicopter picked them up. Between them, they found a single canteen of water, a compass, and a sealed envelope. Melody tore open the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten note. "Welcome to Survival Experience, Advanced Course. You are approximately 15 miles from the nearest road. The compass will point you toward it. The water, if rationed properly, will last one person about 24 hours. 2 people, considerably less. Choose wisely." "V, that bastard," Melody hissed. "He left us out here to die." Trent grabbed the compass, trying to orient himself in the darkness. "Maybe not. If we start walking now, while it's cool, we could cover significant ground before sunrise. And then what? Wander until we die of dehydration?" "He took our phones." "It's better than sitting here," Trent argued. "Look, we just need to." He froze as a sound reached them from somewhere in the darkness. A low, rumbling growl. "What was that?" Melody whispered, instinctively moving closer to Trent. "I don't know. Coyote maybe." But even as he said it, Trent knew that sound was too deep, too menacing for a coyote. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the distinctive sound of padded feet on sand. "Run!" Trent shouted, grabbing Melody's arm and pulling her into motion. They sprinted across the desert floor, their feet slipping on loose sand, their breath coming in panicked gasps. Behind them, the growling creature gave chase, gaining ground with each passing second. "Up there!" Melody pointed to a rocky outcropping. "We can climb." They scrambled up the rocks, cutting their hands on sharp edges in their desperate ascent. Below them, a large shape paced, its eyes reflecting the moonlight. It wasn't a coyote. It was much larger. A mountain lion. How the hell is there a mountain lion out here? Trent gasped, pressing himself against the rock face. "Vince," Melody said, her voice bitter. "This is his doing." Somehow, they remained on the rocks for hours, watching the predator circle below. It was nearly dawn when the animal finally lost interest and padded away into the desert. "We need to move," Trent said, checking the compass. "Before it gets hot." As they made their way across the increasingly hostile landscape, the sun rose mercilessly, heating the air to unbearable temperatures. Their progress slowed to a desperate crawl, their single canteen of water depleting rapidly. "We're not going to make it," Melody said around midday, collapsing onto the sand. 15 miles? In this heat? It's a death sentence." "Keep moving," Trent insisted, pulling her up. "Vince is watching us somehow. I'm sure of it. We can't let him win." "Win? This isn't a game, Trent. He's trying to kill us. If he wanted us dead, we'd be dead already," Trent reasoned. "This is psychological. He's trying to break us." As if on cue, a sound cut through the shimmering heat, the distant whop-whop-whop of helicopter blades. They turned to see a black dot approaching from the east. "Help!" Melody screamed, waving her arms frantically. "Here! We're here!" The helicopter drew closer, hovering 100 feet above them. It was Dom's aircraft. Through the windshield, they could see Vince himself at the controls, watching them with cold detachment. He made no move to land. Instead, a package dropped from the helicopter, landing in the sand near them. Then the aircraft banked away, disappearing back toward the horizon. Trent reached the package first, tearing it open. Inside was a satellite phone, a fresh canteen of water, and another note. "Enjoying the course so far? You've completed the first trial, wildlife encounter, and basic navigation. The phone has one number programmed. Mine. Call when you're ready to confess. Until then, consider this your chance to experience what it's like to be left behind by someone you trusted." I'll be watching. V. Melody grabbed the phone, immediately hitting the call button. Vince answered on the first ring. Already? That was fast. You're insane, she screamed into the receiver. You could have killed us. Strange accusation coming from you, he replied calmly, especially given what I found on your laptop. The detailed plans for my accident on our upcoming climbing expedition. The life insurance policy you took out on me. The consulting you did with that park ranger about disappearance scenarios in remote locations. Melody went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Save it. I've seen it all. Heard it all. I know exactly what you and Trent planned. Fine, she hissed. So what? You can't prove anything. All you're doing now is giving me evidence for a restraining order when I get back. Vince's laugh was cold. Who says you're getting back? The course has just begun, Melody. You have 2 more trials to complete. Besides, you might want to consider your situation more carefully before threatening me. What do you mean? Have you asked Trent about Kylie Porter yet? The name hit Melody like a physical blow. What about her? Ask him, Vince said simply. Then call me back when you're ready to hear my terms. The line went dead. Melody turned to Trent, who had been drinking desperately from the fresh canteen. Who's Kylie Porter? She demanded. Trent's expression closed off immediately. No one. He's trying to divide us. Mind games. Don't lie to me. Melody stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. Vince wouldn't have mentioned her without a reason. Who is she? For a long moment, Trent said nothing. Then, Wesley Porter's sister. The name struck Melody like a slap. Wesley Porter had been one of Vince's clients last year, a wealthy tech entrepreneur who had died in a climbing accident during an expedition that Trent had photographed, an expedition that Melody had helped plan. What about her? Melody asked, though something in her expression suggested she already knew. She's been investigating her brother's death, Trent admitted. She doesn't believe it was an accident. And she's been asking questions about the equipment, about the route changes, about you. Melody's face hardened. You told me you handled that. You said there would be no connection to us. I thought I had. Trent protested. But she's persistent. And she's found something, I don't know what. She contacted me last month, said she had proof. And you didn't think to mention this to me? Melody's voice rose dangerously. I was handling it. Like you handled this desert fiasco? She gestured wildly around them. You said Vince would be helpless out here, that he'd never suspect us. Well, he not only suspected us, he's been 10 steps ahead this whole time. Their argument was interrupted by a sound in the distance. Engines. Multiple engines, growing louder. Someone's coming, Trent said, relief flooding his face. Maybe park rangers? But as the vehicles crested a nearby dune, Melody's expression turned to horror. There were 3 dirt bikes, and riding the lead bike was a man she recognized immediately. Preston Rhodes, the ex-military contractor who had stalked her the previous year. No, she whispered. Vince said he was in prison. Who is that? Trent demanded, seeing her reaction. We need to run. Now. But there was nowhere to run in the open desert. The dirt bikes quickly surrounded them, kicking up clouds of dust. Preston dismounted, removing his helmet to reveal a scarred face and cold, predatory eyes. Mrs. Harlow, he said, his voice eerily polite. Mr. Harlow sends his regards. Chapter 5, Predators. Preston Rhodes circled Melody and Trent like a shark scenting blood. His companions remained on their dirt bikes, engines idling, forming a loose perimeter around them. I've been looking forward to this reunion, Preston said, his voice carrying the artificial pleasantness of a predator toying with its prey. Ever since you filed those false harassment claims against me. They weren't false, Melody shot back, though her voice trembled. You were stalking me. Preston laughed, a harsh sound in the desert stillness. You flirted with me for weeks, led me on, then cried harassment when your husband found out. Classic Melody. What do you want? Trent interjected, trying to sound braver than he felt. Me? I'm just the transportation. Preston gestured to the dirt bikes. Mr. Harlow was quite specific about where to take you for the next phase of your education. Melody's eyes narrowed. Vince put you up to this? I thought you hated him too. Let's just say we found common ground. Preston replied, cryptically. Now, we can do this the easy way, or we can do this the enjoyable way. His hand drifted to a stun baton at his hip. Your choice. 30 minutes later, Melody and Trent found themselves being escorted into a cave complex cut into the side of a rocky hill. Unlike the modern comfort of Outpost 5, this place was primitive, illuminated only by battery-powered lanterns that cast long shadows across the rough stone walls. Preston led them to a central chamber where a table had been set up. On it lay several items, 2 backpacks, some climbing gear, and a tablet computer. "Welcome to Trial 2, Preston announced, gesturing grandly. "Mr. Harlow prepared this specially for you." The tablet screen flickered to life, showing Vince's face. Unlike his previous cold demeanor, he now wore an unsettling smile. "I see you've met my associate," he said through the screen. "Preston was kind enough to assist me when I explained the situation. Turns out, he's not particularly fond of people who manipulate others and then discard them." "Vince, please," Melody began. "This has gone far enough. We can talk about this." "We're well past talking," Vince cut her off. "Now it's time for demonstration. You see, while you were planning my unfortunate accident, I was documenting everything. Every conversation, every email, every meeting with Trent, including," he paused meaningfully, "your discussions about Wesley Porter." Trent surged forward. "You don't know anything about Porter, don't I?" Vince's expression hardened. "I know you tampered with his climbing gear after Melody convinced him to take an unauthorized route. I know you both collected on the promotional deal with his company after his tragic accident. And I know Kylie Porter has been assembling evidence against you both for months." Melody's face had gone ashen. That's not what happened." "Save it for someone who hasn't heard you laughing about it on recorded video," Vince replied coldly. "Now, here's what's going to happen. Those backpacks contain supplies for 24 hours. Preston is going to escort you to a specific location. Your task is simple: survive until extraction. And if we refuse," Trent challenged, "then Preston delivers you and all my evidence to Kylie Porter," Vince answered simply. "Your choice." Melody and Trent exchanged glances. They both knew they had no real option. "Fine," Melody finally said. "What's the catch?" Vince's smile returned. So perceptive. "The catch is that the location is the same area where Wesley Porter died. I thought fitting. And one more thing. You'll need to trust each other completely to survive. Good luck with that." The screen went dark. Preston gestured to the backpacks. "Shall we? It's a 2-hour ride, and the sun's not getting any cooler." The journey through the desert on the back of the dirt bikes was brutal. By the time they reached their destination, a steep cliff face with a precarious path winding up its side, Melody and Trent were exhausted, dehydrated, and increasingly hostile toward each other. "This is it," Preston announced, bringing his bike to a stop. "Home sweet home." The site was familiar to both of them. The same remote climbing location where Wesley Porter had fallen to his death 14 months earlier. The memory of that day hung between them like a ghost. "Your task," Preston explained, handing them each a backpack, "is to climb to the shelter at the top before nightfall. Everything you need is in these packs." Mr. Harlow was very specific about the contents. "And tomorrow?" Melody asked, eyeing the imposing cliff warily. "If you make it through the night, I'll return with extraction at noon." Preston mounted his bike again. "Oh, and one more thing. There's only enough water for one of you. Mr. Harlow said to tell you, choose better than I did when I chose you." With that, he and his companions roared away, leaving Melody and Trent alone at the base of the cliff. "This is insane," Trent muttered, opening his backpack. Inside, he found climbing gear, some protein bars, a thin blanket, and an empty water bottle. "Where's the water?" Melody checked her own pack and found a single large canteen, nearly full. "I have it." Trent's eyes locked on the container. "We'll share it." "Like hell we will," she snapped, clutching the canteen protectively. "You heard what Preston said. There's only enough for one. So what? You're just going to let me die of dehydration? After what you just revealed about Kylie Porter, I'm considering it." Their argument escalated as the afternoon wore on, both aware that the climbing would become impossible once darkness fell. Finally, operating in tense silence, they began their ascent. Halfway up the cliff face, secured by ropes to a narrow ledge, Trent made his move. While Melody was focused on securing her next handhold, he lunged for the canteen attached to her belt. "What are you doing?" she cried as they grappled precariously on a ledge. The canteen slipped from both their grasp, tumbling down the cliff face before smashing on the rocks below. "Look what you did," Trent shouted, his face contorted with rage and fear. "What I did? You tried to steal it." Their shouting match was interrupted by a sound from above, a slow, mocking applause. They looked up to see Vince sitting calmly at the cliff's edge, watching them. "Bravo," he called down. "You lasted longer than I expected before turning on each other." "Vince," Melody called, her anger temporarily redirected. "This is attempted murder. You can't do this." "Actually, this is a private expedition that you both voluntarily joined," he replied. "I have the waivers with your signatures. And as for the water," he held up a canteen of his own. "There's plenty up here. All you have to do is finish the climb." The sun was setting fast, painting the desert in crimson and gold. Darkness would make the climb nearly impossible, and without water, they wouldn't survive the night exposed on the cliff. "We don't have a choice," Trent muttered. "We have to keep going." Working in bitter silence, they continued their ascent. As the last light faded, they finally pulled themselves over the edge onto a small plateau. There, they found a rudimentary shelter, little more than a lean-to with sleeping mats, and Vince sitting beside a small campfire. "Congratulations," he said, not looking up from the flames. "You've completed Trial 2. "Enough games," Trent snarled, stepping toward Vince. "This ends now." With surprising speed, Vince was on his feet, a hunting knife appearing in his hand. "I wouldn't," he said softly. The deadly calm in his voice stopped Trent cold. Vince tossed them each a canteen of water. "Drink. Rest. You'll need your strength for tomorrow." "Why are you doing this?" Melody asked, her voice hoarse from exertion and thirst. "If you know everything, why not just go to the police?" "Because the legal system is too merciful for what you've done," Vince answered, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Wesley Porter was my friend before he was your victim. He trusted me to keep him safe, and through you, I failed him." He turned his gaze directly to Melody. "And you betrayed not just me, but everything I built, everything I am. So what happens now?" Trent asked, sinking to the ground in exhaustion. "Now," Vince smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Now we wait for our guest." "What guest?" Melody demanded. As if in answer, the sound of an approaching helicopter cut through the night air. Minutes later, a tall, slender woman with Porter's same chestnut hair and determined jawline emerged from the darkness and stepped into the circle of firelight. "Hello, Melody." "Trent." Kylie Porter's voice was hard as steel. "We have a lot to talk about." Chapter 6, Confession. Kylie Porter's presence changed everything. She moved with the precise confidence of someone who had been planning this confrontation for a long time, her eyes never leaving Melody and Trent as she took a seat beside Vince at the fire. "I've imagined this moment for 14 months, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion clearly simmering beneath the surface. 14 months of nightmares about how my brother died. 14 months of being told it was just a tragic accident. It was an accident, Trent insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. The equipment failed. The equipment was tampered with, Kylie countered. And now I have proof. She nodded to Vince, who produced a tablet and passed it to her. Kylie turned the screen toward them. On it played a video, security footage from what appeared to be the equipment room at Phantom Ridge Expeditions the night before Wesley Porter's fatal climb. The footage clearly showed Trent entering the room alone, examining Porter's climbing gear and making subtle adjustments to the carabiners and rope connections. "Where did you get this?" Trent whispered, his face draining of color. "Vince maintains cameras in all equipment areas," Kylie answered. "Standard safety protocol. He just never had reason to review this particular footage until I started asking questions." "That proves nothing," Melody interjected, though her voice trembled slightly. "Regular equipment checks are normal. At 3 in the morning? Without logging the inspection?" Kylie shook her head. "And that's just the beginning. I also have your emails discussing the modified route you suggested to Wesley." The route that took him along that unstable ledge. The route that wasn't in Vince's approved expedition plan. The fire crackled in the silence that followed, casting flickering shadows across the tense faces around it. "Why?" Kylie finally asked, the single word laden with pain. "Why my brother?" Melody and Trent exchanged glances, each clearly waiting for the other to speak first. Finally, Trent broke. "It wasn't supposed to be fatal," he said, his shoulders slumping. "Just enough of an accident to generate publicity." Wesley agreed to it. "Liar." Kylie lunged forward, but Vince caught her arm, holding her back. "Let him finish," Vince said quietly. "I want to hear this." Trent swallowed hard. Wesley's company was launching their new outdoor gear line. He wanted dramatic publicity for the launch, something that would show the gear saving lives in extreme circumstances. "We planned a controlled accident, a close call that I would capture on camera. The gear would perform heroically, Wesley would be safe, and everyone would benefit from the publicity." "So what went wrong?" Vince asked, his voice dangerously soft. "The ledge was more unstable than we anticipated," Trent continued. "When he put his weight on it, it gave way completely instead of just cracking like we planned. The safety equipment should have held, but—" He trailed off, unwilling to complete the thought. "But you modified it too much," Vince finished for him. "You weakened it past the safety threshold." Trent didn't deny it. "After it happened, we had a choice. Admit to staging a publicity stunt that went horribly wrong, or let it appear as a tragic, genuine accident. We," Kylie prompted, her gaze shifting to Melody. Melody's composure finally cracked. "Fine. Yes, I knew about the plan. I helped coordinate it, but never thought anyone would get hurt, let alone killed." "And afterwards?" Vince asked. "When you collected on the promotional deal with his company, when you used his death to boost your social media following with your heartfelt posts about losing a dear friend?" "That was opportunistic, not malicious," Melody defended weakly. "We couldn't undo what happened." "No," Kylie agreed, her voice tight with controlled fury. "You couldn't bring my brother back, but you could have told the truth. You could have given my family closure instead of lies." The night grew colder as the conversation continued, each revelation more damning than the last. Kylie produced more evidence, text messages, promotional contracts signed after Wesley's death, social media analytics showing how Melody's following had surged in the aftermath of the tragedy. By dawn, the full picture had emerged, an elaborate publicity stunt gone wrong, followed by a calculated cover-up, all motivated by fame and money. Throughout the night, Vince had said little, just watched as Kylie methodically dismantled Melody and Trent's denials with relentless evidence. As the first light of morning painted the eastern sky, Vince finally spoke again. "Trial 3 begins now," he announced, rising to his feet. "Your final test. Haven't we been through enough?" Melody pleaded, her face streaked with tears from the night's revelations. "Not nearly," Vince replied coldly. "This trial is simple. Confession." He produced a professional video camera and set it up on a tripod facing them. "You will record complete confessions. Everything about Wesley Porter. Everything about your plan for my accident. Every detail. No omissions. And if we refuse," Trent challenged, though his defiance had diminished considerably since the previous day. "Then this evidence goes to the authorities today," Kylie answered. "All of it, including the new material from your conversations last night, which Vince has been recording. And if we confess," Melody asked quietly. "Then we have leverage," Vince explained. "Insurance that ensures you'll do exactly as instructed moving forward." "What do you want?" Trent asked. "First, you'll both sign documents transferring any and all claims to Phantom Ridge Expeditions to me exclusively," Vince began. "Then, you'll resign from your positions and publicly disassociate from Wesley's company. Finally, you'll make restitution to Kylie and the Porter family, 7 figures each minimum." "That would ruin us," Melody protested. "As opposed to prison," Kylie countered. "Because that's the alternative." The choice was clear, though hardly a choice at all. One by one, they sat before the camera and confessed everything. When it was done, Vince collected signed documents that Kylie produced from her briefcase, legal forms prepared in advance by attorneys that effectively stripped Melody and Trent of any claim to Vince's company and assets, while establishing substantial financial restitution to the Porter family. "Are we done now?" Melody asked when the paperwork was complete, her voice hollow. "Almost," Vince replied, checking his watch. "Preston should be arriving soon for extraction." "And then what?" Trent asked. "And then you disappear," Vince said simply. "Both of you. New identities. New locations. Neither of you ever contacts me or the Porter family again. You're forcing us into exile?" Melody gasped. "I'm giving you a chance to avoid prison," Vince corrected. "Which is more than you planned to give me. More than you gave Wesley." The sound of approaching dirt bikes signaled Preston's arrival. As they gathered their few belongings, Melody made one last attempt to reach Vince. "I did love you once," she said quietly. "In the beginning." Vince looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "No, Melody, you loved what I represented. Success, security, status. You never loved me. You turned away, and I won't make that mistake again." Preston and his companions arrived, ready to transport Melody and Trent back to civilization, or what would be left of it for them after Vince's retribution was complete. As they prepared to depart, Kylie approached Vince, speaking quietly so the others couldn't hear. "Thank you," she said simply, "for helping me get justice for Wesley." Vince nodded, his expression softening slightly for the first time in days. He deserved better than what happened to him. "What you did here," Kylie hesitated. "It was extreme, but necessary. Sometimes the desert is the only place where true justice can be found," Vince replied. "Out here, there's nowhere to hide from who you really are." As Preston led Melody and Trent away, Vince stood with Kylie at the cliff's edge, watching the sunrise fully illuminate the vast, unforgiving landscape that had been both his home and his weapon of retribution. The desert had revealed its truth, as it always did, and Vince Harlow had proven himself its most dedicated disciple. Chapter 7. Aftermath. 6 weeks after the desert ordeal, Vince sat in the expansive office of Phantom Ridge Expeditions, reviewing the quarterly reports. Business was booming, ironically bolstered by the mysterious disappearance of Melody Harlow and Trent Westlake from public life. The speculation had created a surge of interest in the company, even as Vince maintained a stoic silence about his estranged wife's whereabouts. The official story, carefully constructed and disseminated through proper channels, was that Melody and Trent had embarked on a private expedition to remote international locations for an exclusive documentary project. Few questioned it. Those who did received politely vague responses from Phantom Ridge's PR team. The reality was considerably different. Following their confessions, Melody and Trent had been transported to separate locations. Their assets had been liquidated to pay restitution to the Porter family. Their social media accounts, once their lifeblood, had gone dormant. For all practical purposes, they had ceased to exist in their previous forms. A knock at the door interrupted Vince's thoughts. His assistant ushered in Faye, whose expression was tense despite her attempt at a casual greeting. "Have you seen this?" she asked without preamble, sliding a tablet across his desk. On the screen was a news article about a private investigator hired by Melody's parents, who had grown concerned about their daughter's extended absence. The investigator was asking pointed questions about Phantom Ridge and Vince's last interactions with his wife. "It was inevitable," Vince said, pushing the tablet back toward Faye. "But it changes nothing. The confessions and legal documents protect us." "Us?" Faye raised an eyebrow. "Vince, I helped you expose her betrayal. I didn't sign up for whatever happened out in that desert." "Nothing happened that they didn't deserve," Vince replied evenly. "And nothing that can be proven." Faye studied her brother's face, searching for something. Remorse, perhaps, or concern. She found neither. "You've changed," she finally said. "The Vince I knew wouldn't have been so cold." "The Vince you knew died the moment he discovered his wife was planning his murder," he replied, his voice hardening. "But enough about that. What's the status on the Porter settlement?" Faye recognized the deflection, but allowed it. "Final payments were transferred yesterday. Kylie has officially withdrawn all legal inquiries into Wesley's death." "Good." Vince nodded, then glanced at his watch. I have a meeting with the board in 20 minutes. Anything else? Faye hesitated, then decided to press forward. Dom called. He's concerned about Preston Rhodes. This caught Vince's attention. What about him? Apparently, Preston's been talking. Nothing specific yet, but Dom thinks he might be testing the waters, seeing what his information might be worth to the right buyer. A shadow crossed Vince's features. I'll handle Preston. Like you handle Melody and Trent? Faye challenged. If necessary, Vince replied without elaboration. Now, if there's nothing else. The dismissal was clear. Faye rose, pausing at the door. Just be careful, Vince. Revenge changes people. Sometimes into someone they never wanted to be. After she left, Vince sat in silence for several minutes, her words echoing in his mind. Then he reached for his phone and dialed a number from memory. It's me, he said when the line connected. We need to meet. Tonight. The usual place. He listened briefly, then added, Yes, it's about Preston. He's becoming a problem. That evening, Vince drove to an isolated diner on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place that catered to truckers and others seeking anonymity. In a back booth, a heavy-set man with a weathered face and calculating eyes waited. Oscar, Vince acknowledged as he slid into the seat opposite. Oscar Harlow, Vince's estranged father, nodded in return. Son, been a while. The similarities between them were subtle but unmistakable. The same watchful gaze, the same economy of movement, the same aura of controlled danger. Preston Rhodes is talking, Vince said without preamble. About the desert. Oscar took a sip of his coffee, seemingly unconcerned. Not surprising. Men like Preston always talk eventually. The question is, what do you want to do about it? That depends on what you know about him. A thin smile crossed Oscar's face. I know everyone with a certain skill set in this region. Preston included. He has a weakness. I'm listening. As Oscar detailed Preston's vulnerabilities, his gambling debts, his ex-wife who still held leverage over him, his probation conditions that could easily be violated, Vince was reminded why he had reluctantly reached out to his father despite their troubled history. Oscar Harlow had connections in the darker corners of society that even Vince, with his military background, couldn't access. Handling Preston is simple, Oscar concluded. The question is whether it's worth the cost. What cost? Reconnecting with me, Oscar replied bluntly. I help with this, you stop shutting me out. Families should stick together, especially after what happened with that wife of yours. Vince's expression hardened. How much do you know about that? Enough to know you finally put my teachings to good use, Oscar said, a hint of pride in his voice. The desert justice. Using people's weaknesses against them. That was all straight from my playbook. The realization struck Vince with unexpected force. In exacting his revenge, he had indeed employed the very tactics his father had used throughout his criminal career. Tactics Vince had once despised. I'm not like you, he said coldly. No, Oscar laughed. Then why am I here? Why are we discussing how to silence a potential witness? Face it, son. The apple didn't fall far from the tree after all. Before Vince could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Dom. Rhodes on the move. Headed to local news station. ETA, 30 minutes. Decision time, Oscar said, noting the change in Vince's expression. Are we family again or not? Vince stood abruptly. Handle Preston. Your way. But this doesn't make us family. It's a start, Oscar replied with a satisfied smile. I'll be in touch about my payment. As Vince left the diner, he felt a familiar darkness settling over him. The same darkness that had guided him through the desert ordeal with Melody and Trent. The same darkness that had allowed him to orchestrate their systematic breaking. His phone rang. Kylie Porter. Vince? I just got a strange call from a man named Preston Rhodes. He wants to meet. Says he has information about Wesley's case that I should know. Don't meet him. Vince instructed immediately. It's being handled. What does that mean? Kylie asked, her voice tense. It means I'm keeping my promise to you, Vince replied. Justice for Wesley, no matter the cost. After hanging up, Vince drove to a secluded viewpoint overlooking the desert that had been both his sanctuary and weapon. The vast, ancient landscape stretched before him, indifferent to the human dramas playing out upon its surface. His phone buzzed again. A message from Oscar, Package secured. Delivery in progress. We'll call with confirmation. Vince closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his choices. In destroying Melody and Trent, in silencing Preston, in reconnecting with Oscar, had he become the very thing he once despised? The desert offered no answer, only the relentless truth that had always defined it. Survive or perish. Adapt or die. There was no room for weakness, no place for forgiveness. And Vince Harlow, once a man who taught others to survive the wilderness, had become its perfect embodiment. Beautiful, dangerous, and utterly unforgiving. Chapter 8. Convergence. The charity gala for wilderness preservation should have been a triumphant moment for Vince. Under the crystal chandeliers of the Grand Sierra Hotel ballroom, Nevada's elite had gathered to support Phantom Ridge Expedition's new conservation initiative. 6 months had passed since the desert incident, and Vince had successfully rebuilt his public image as a dedicated environmentalist and adventure entrepreneur. Yet as he navigated the crowd of admirers and potential investors, Vince felt a familiar tension in his shoulders. Preston Rhodes had been handled by Oscar's connections, currently serving time for probation violations related to conveniently discovered gambling debts. The investigation into Melody and Trent's disappearance had stalled due to lack of evidence and jurisdiction complications. By all accounts, Vince had won. So why did victory feel so hollow? Mr. Harlow, a voice called from behind him. A moment of your time. Vince turned to find himself face to face with a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, her press credentials identifying her as Diana Reeves, investigative reporter for the National Observer. Ms. Reeves, he acknowledged with practiced courtesy. Enjoying the event? Immensely, she replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Though I find myself more interested in your wife's conspicuous absence. 6 months is a long disappearance, even for adventure influencers. My wife's professional commitments are her own, Vince responded smoothly. We've been separated for some time, as I've stated previously. Yes, your official statement. Diana's smile tightened. I've been looking into some inconsistencies in that narrative. For instance, no record of Melody or Trent Westlake leaving the country, despite claims of an international expedition. No communication from either on any platform. No financial activity. Vince maintained his composed expression. I'm not my wife's keeper, Ms. Reeves. Perhaps that contributed to our separation. Perhaps, she conceded. Or perhaps something happened out in that desert 6 months ago. Something involving your father, Oscar Harlow. The mention of his father's name sent a cold jolt through Vince, though he revealed nothing. My father and I are estranged. Have been for years. Interesting, then, that you were seen meeting with him the night Preston Rhodes was arrested, Diana pressed. The same Preston Rhodes who worked for your company and was reportedly the last person to see your wife before her expedition. Before Vince could formulate a response, a commotion near the entrance drew attention. Through the crowd, he spotted a familiar figure, Brooke Kingsley, Trent's sister. She stood scanning the room, her expression determined. Excuse me, Vince said to Diana. Duty calls. He moved quickly through the crowd, intercepting Brooke before she could make a scene. Miss Kingsley, this is a surprise. Where is my brother? She demanded without preamble, her voice low but intense. I believe he's on assignment overseas, Vince replied, steering her toward a quieter corner. Though we don't exactly keep in touch. Lies, Brooke hissed. I've hired investigators. They found nothing. No trail, no records, nothing. It's like he vanished into thin air. And the last person he contacted was you. That's not accurate, Vince countered calmly. His last assignment with Phantom Ridge was months ago, before he and my wife decided to pursue independent projects. You did something to them, Brooke insisted, her eyes blazing. And I'm going to prove it. From across the room, Vince caught sight of Dom making his way toward them, concern evident in his expression. Simultaneously, he noticed Diana Reeves observing the exchange with keen interest. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Vince needed to contain it. Ms. Kingsley, he said, his voice dropped to a whisper, making accusations without evidence is dangerously close to slander. I suggest you reconsider your approach. Is that a threat? Brooke challenged. A statement of fact, Vince replied. Now, I can have security escort you out, or you can leave voluntarily. Your choice. Their standoff was interrupted by the arrival of Kylie Porter, elegant in a black evening gown. Everything all right here? She asked, her presence creating an immediate tension with Brooke. Fine, Vince assured her. Ms. Kingsley was just leaving. Brooke's gaze shifted between Vince and Kylie, realization dawning in her eyes. You're working together, she said. This is about Wesley Porter, isn't it? Kylie's composure faltered slightly before she recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. My brother mentioned Wesley before he disappeared, Brooke continued. Said there was complicated history there. And now you two are thick as thieves while my brother is missing? That's not coincidence. Dom finally reached them, positioning himself strategically between Brooke and the others. Ma'am, I need to ask you to leave. This isn't over, Brooke promised as Dom escorted her toward the exit. Not by a long shot. As she departed, Vince noticed Diana Reeves watching intently, her reporter's instinct clearly sensing a story. The carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. We need to talk, Kylie said urgently. Not here. Later that night, in Vince's penthouse overlooking the city, Kylie paced anxiously while Dom secured the premises and checked for surveillance. It's clean, he reported, rejoining them in the living room. But that reporter's been digging deep. She's connected you to Oscar and Preston. It's only a matter of time before she puts more pieces together. And now Trent's sister is involved, Kylie added, collapsing onto the sofa. This is unraveling, Vince. Vince remained calm, pouring himself a whiskey as he considered their options. Nothing concrete has emerged. No evidence ties us to what happened in the desert. Except Preston, Dom reminded him. And your father. Wild cards, both of them. Preston is contained, Vince replied. And Oscar won't talk. It would implicate him as well. Are you sure about that? Kylie challenged. From what you've told me, your father isn't exactly trustworthy. The truth of her statement hung in the air. Oscar Harlow had indeed proven useful in handling Preston, but at a cost. He'd been inserting himself more frequently into Vince's life, leveraging their collaboration as an entry point back into his son's world. And Oscar had his own agenda, always had. We need insurance, Vince decided. Something to neutralize these threats permanently. What kind of insurance? Dom asked. Before Vince could answer, his secure phone rang, the one reserved for critical contacts. The display showed a number he didn't recognize. Harlow, he answered cautiously. Hello, son. Oscar's voice, calm and collected. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. Your home isn't secure. Meet me at the old mining site in 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead before Vince could respond. What is it? Kylie asked, noting his expression. My father, Vince replied, already moving toward his secure room where he kept emergency equipment. Says my place is compromised. Wants to meet. It could be a trap, Dom warned. With the heat coming down from that reporter and Trent's sister, Oscar might be looking to cover his tracks. Which is exactly why I need to go, Vince countered. Better to confront the threat directly. Within 30 minutes, Vince was driving through the darkness toward the abandoned mining operation where he'd occasionally met Oscar for sensitive conversations. The remote location, owned through shell companies linked to Oscar's past associates, offered privacy and security, or so he had thought. As he navigated the rough access road, Vince's mind raced. Had Oscar been playing him all along? Was this meeting a setup? The possibility seemed increasingly likely given the timing and Oscar's cryptic warning about his home being compromised. The mining site appeared deserted when he arrived, the dilapidated structures casting eerie shadows in his headlights. Vince parked at a distance, approaching on foot with his hand near the concealed weapon at his waist. Punctual as always, Oscar's voice came from the shadows near the main building. A valuable trait. What's this about? Vince demanded, scanning for potential threats. What do you mean my home is compromised? Oscar emerged, his weathered face half illuminated by the moonlight. That reporter, Diana Reeves, has an informant inside your organization. Someone feeding her information about your desert activities. Oh, your sister. Oscar replied without hesitation. Faye's been talking. The accusation hit Vince like a physical blow. You're lying. Am I? Oscar produced a digital recorder and pressed play. Faye's voice emerged clearly. Can't keep covering for him, Diana. What happened in the desert cross lines? Vince isn't the man I thought he was. Oscar stopped the recording. There's more. Much more. Seems your sisters developed a conscience about what happened to your wife and her boyfriend. How did you get this? Vince demanded. I've been watching Faye since she started acting strange around you, Oscar explained. Father's intuition. When she contacted the reporter, I had people intercept their communications. Vince's mind raced, assessing this new threat. Faye had indeed been distant recently, asking uncomfortable questions about Melody and Trent's fate. He'd attributed it to natural concern, but perhaps there was more. Why tell me this? Vince asked. What do you want? Same thing I've always wanted, Oscar replied. Family. Recognition. My rightful place in your operation. He stepped closer. You built something impressive, son. Something with potential beyond your current vision. With my connections and your legitimate front, we could expand in ways you've never imagined. Criminal ways, Vince stated flatly. Oscar shrugged. Business opportunities with less regulatory oversight. The distinction is meaningless. And if I refuse, then I can't help you with your sister problem, Oscar said simply. Or the reporter. Or Trent's increasingly troublesome sister. Problems have a way of multiplying, son, unless someone with experience handles them. The implication was clear. Oscar was offering to solve these threats permanently in exchange for a partnership. A partnership that would transform Phantom Ridge from a legitimate business into a front for Oscar's criminal enterprises. I need time to think, Vince said, buying space to formulate a counter-strategy. Take 24 hours, Oscar agreed. But remember, the clock is ticking. Your sister's meeting the reporter again tomorrow night. As Vince drove back toward the city, his mind churned with the implications of Oscar's revelation. If Faye was indeed cooperating with Diana Reeves, everything he'd built could crumble. The carefully orchestrated justice for Wesley Porter, the retribution against Melody and Trent, his own freedom, all were at risk. But partnering with Oscar would mean becoming exactly what he'd spent his life avoiding. His father's son in the fullest, darkest sense. When he arrived home, he found Dom waiting with urgent news of his own. There's been activity on one of the emergency accounts you set up, Dom reported. Someone accessed the funds from a terminal in Mexico City. Melody or Trent? Facial recognition confirms it was Trent, Dom said, showing him the security footage. He's alive, Vince. And if he's resurfaced, then he might be coming back, Vince finished grimly. Possibly with evidence against us. The walls were closing in from multiple directions. Oscar wanting a criminal partnership. Faye potentially betraying him to a reporter. Trent resurfacing from his enforced exile. Brooke Kingsley making public accusations. The irony wasn't lost on Vince. He had orchestrated a perfect desert punishment for those who betrayed him, only to find himself now surrounded by betrayal on all sides. What's the play? Dom asked, his loyalty one of the few constants in this unraveling situation. Vince stared out at the distant desert, visible as a dark void beyond the city lights. The place that had defined him. The place that had taught him its harsh truths. We go back to the beginning, he said finally. Back to where it all started. The desert, Dom nodded in understanding. The desert, Vince confirmed. But this time we bring all the players together. Oscar, Faye, even Trent, if we can locate him. One final reckoning. And then what? Then we let the desert decide, Vince said, his expression hardening into something unrecognizable even to himself. The way it always has. Chapter 9, Judgment. The abandoned research station sat like a fortress in the heart of the desert, its concrete structures bleached pale by years of relentless sun. Once used for classified government weather experiments, it had been decommissioned decades ago and eventually purchased through one of Phantom Ridge's shell companies. Few people knew of its existence. Fewer still could locate it without precise coordinates. It was the perfect location for Vince's final gambit. From the main building's observation room, he surveyed the barren landscape through high-powered binoculars, watching as the first helicopter approached from the east. Right on schedule. "They're here," he announced to Dom, who was monitoring the security systems. "All communications are blocked as requested," Dom confirmed. "No signals in or out except through our control channels." Vince nodded, satisfied. "And our other guests?" "Oscar arrived an hour ago, currently secured in the East Wing. Faye's being brought in on the second transport. We've got a lead on Trent's location in Baja. Extraction team is en route." "And Kylie?" "Declined your invitation," Dom reported. "Said she wants no part of whatever you're planning." "Smart woman," Vince murmured. Of all the players in this drama, Kylie Porter alone seemed to recognize when to walk away. The helicopter landed in the designated area, kicking up swirls of sand. Diana Reeves emerged, escorted by two of Vince's security personnel. They had invited her to an exclusive story about Phantom Ridge's new desert research initiative, a pretense she had eagerly accepted despite her suspicions about Vince. 30 minutes later, the second helicopter arrived carrying Faye, who had been intercepted en route to her scheduled meeting with Diana. Unlike the reporter, Faye understood immediately that this was no ordinary invitation. The look she gave Vince when she was brought into the main room spoke volumes. "What is this, Vince?" she demanded, glancing nervously at Diana Reeves, who sat at a distance, observing their interaction with keen interest. "Family reunion," Vince replied coldly, "with a few additional guests." "You're making a mistake," Faye warned, lowering her voice. "Whatever you think you know." "I know enough," Vince interrupted. "The question is, how much have you told Ms. Reeves about our desert activities?" Faye's silence was confirmation enough. Vince gestured to Dom, who escorted her to a seat across from Diana. The reporter watched this exchange with undisguised fascination, clearly sensing the story expanding beyond her initial expectations. "Mr. Harlow," Diana finally spoke up, "I was promised an exclusive about your research initiative. This seems different." "It is," Vince acknowledged, turning his attention to her. "You've been investigating my wife's disappearance, my father's criminal connections, and events that occurred in this desert 6 months ago. Today, you get your exclusive, the complete story, but on my terms." Diana's professional mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise before she composed herself. "And those terms are?" "You listen first," Vince stated. "Then I'll answer your questions. Once. After that, you decide what story you publish, if any." "That's not how journalism works," Diana objected. "It is today," Vince replied with finality. "Because this isn't just about a story for you. It's about survival for all of us." Before Diana could respond, Dom signaled from the security console. "Third transport incoming." "It's Oscar." Oscar Harlow entered the room with the confident stride of a man who believed himself to be in control of the situation. He took in the assembled group with a calculating gaze before settling on Vince. "Interesting gathering, son," he remarked, "though I don't recall agreeing to an audience." "Plans change," Vince replied. "Have a seat." Oscar remained standing. "I prefer to maintain tactical advantages when possible." "As do I," Vince countered, nodding to Dom, who activated a control panel on the wall. Metal shutters descended over the windows while reinforced security doors sealed the room's exits. "Please, sit." Recognizing the shift in power dynamics, Oscar complied, choosing a position that allowed him to observe everyone. "Now we wait for our final guest," Vince announced. "Trent Westlake," Diana surmised, her reporter's instinct connecting the dots. "You found him. He'll be joining us shortly," Vince confirmed. "In the meantime, let me tell you all a story about desert justice." Over the next hour, Vince methodically laid out the events that had led them to this moment. He revealed Melody and Trent's betrayal, their plan to eliminate him for control of his company, and the evidence he had gathered against them. He explained their connection to Wesley Porter's death and the elaborate punishment he had orchestrated in the desert. Throughout his narrative, he watched the varied reactions of his audience. Diana documented everything with professional detachment, though her expression betrayed occasional shock at the more brutal details. Faye alternated between shame and defiance, especially when Vince described the psychological tactics he had employed against Melody and Trent. Oscar unsurprisingly, listened with something resembling pride. So you left them in the desert with false identities and clean financial records, Diana clarified when Vince finished, essentially erasing their previous lives. They received better than they had planned for me, Vince replied without remorse, and far better than Wesley Porter received. And now Trent has resurfaced, Diana continued, potentially threatening to expose your vigilante justice. Hence our gathering today, Vince confirmed. The loose ends are converging, Ms. Reeves, including you. The implication hung heavily in the air. Diana glanced toward the sealed exits, her professional composure faltering slightly. If you're planning to silence us all, she said carefully, bringing us together seems counterproductive. If that were my intention, there would be more efficient methods, Vince replied. No, I brought you here for a different purpose. At that moment, Dom received another alert. Final transport approaching. ETA, 5 minutes. The tension in the room escalated as they awaited Trent's arrival. When he was finally escorted in, thinner, weathered, but very much alive, his presence completed the circle of players in Vince's orchestrated drama. Trent's eyes widened as he took in the assembled group. What is this? He demanded hoarsely. The reckoning, Vince answered simply, gesturing to the last empty chair. Once Trent was seated, Vince moved to the center of the room, commanding everyone's attention. Each of you represents a threat to what I've built, he began. Diana, with your investigation. Faye, with your betrayal. Oscar, with your criminal aspirations for my company. And Trent, with your unexpected resurrection. He paused, surveying each face. Conventional wisdom would suggest eliminating these threats permanently. Then why haven't you? Trent challenged, his voice strained. Because the desert taught me something about justice, Vince replied. True justice isn't about elimination. It's about balance. Consequences properly aligned with actions. He moved to a control panel and activated a large screen on the far wall. It displayed a digital countdown clock set to 60 minutes. In 1 hour, this facility's location and purpose will be broadcast to federal authorities, along with comprehensive evidence of various crimes associated with it, Vince explained. These crimes include Oscar's numerous illegal operations, details of Wesley Porter's death, and the forced exile of Melody and Trent. Oscar's expression darkened dangerously. You're exposing all of us, including yourself? Unless the appropriate parties depart before the countdown concludes, Vince clarified. Transportation is waiting outside. Enough for everyone except one person. Who stays behind? Faye asked, understanding dawning in her eyes. The person most deserving of desert justice, Vince replied. That's for you all to decide collectively. The implication was clear. They would have to choose a sacrifice to remain behind and face the consequences when authorities arrived. The others would escape with their freedom intact. This is insane, Diana objected. You can't expect us to. I expect you to apply the same ruthless judgment to each other that you've been willing to apply to others, Vince interrupted. Oscar, you've sacrificed countless people to protect your criminal enterprises. Faye, you were willing to sacrifice me to ease your conscience. Trent, you sacrificed Wesley Porter for fame and profit. And Ms. Reeves, you've sacrificed truth for sensationalism throughout your career. He gestured to the countdown. You have 1 hour to decide who deserves to face justice most. Choose wisely. With that, Vince nodded to Dom, who followed him from the room through a hidden door that sealed behind them, leaving the 4 occupants to their deliberations. In a facility's secure monitoring room, Vince and Dom watched on multiple screens as chaos erupted. Accusations flew, alliances formed and dissolved within minutes, and true natures were revealed under pressure. Oscar immediately attempted to assert dominance through intimidation. Diana tried to broker reasonable discussion while secretly recording everything on a hidden device. Faye appealed to moral principles. Trent, broken by his months in exile, oscillated between desperate pleas and bitter accusations. You think they'll actually choose? Dom asked as the minutes ticked by. They'll have to, Vince replied. Survival instinct will force a decision. Indeed, as the countdown approached the 30-minute mark, the discussion became more focused, more pragmatic. Oscar argued that Trent should stay behind, having already died once in the public eye. Trent countered that Oscar's criminal history made him the obvious choice. Faye suggested Diana, reasoning that a reporter would receive the most lenient treatment from authorities. Diana proposed they all refuse to choose, forcing Vince's hand. "They're missing the point," Vince observed. "This isn't about escaping consequences. It's about acknowledging who truly deserves them." When only 15 minutes remained, a shift occurred. Faye, who had been quieter during the most recent arguments, suddenly stood and addressed the group. "It should be Vince," she declared. "He orchestrated everything. Wesley's death cover-up, Melody and Trent's exile, this entire situation. He's the one who deserves to face justice." "Interesting development," Dom commented, watching Vince's reaction. "Expected," Vince replied calmly. "She's not wrong from her perspective." As the countdown fell below 10 minutes, the discussion had transformed into a unified front against the absent Vince. Even Oscar eventually agreed, his survival instinct outweighing family loyalty. Their collective decision refused to sacrifice one of their own and instead demand Vince take responsibility for his actions. When only 5 minutes remained, Vince finally re-entered the room. The four participants fell silent, their unified stance evident in their positioning. "We've reached a decision," Faye announced. "We choose you, Vince. You should be the one to stay behind." Vince absorbed this without surprise. An interesting choice. Unfortunately, not one of the available options. "This was your game," Oscar growled. "Your test of justice. Face the consequences of your own actions." "Oh, I am," Vince assured him, "but not in the way you imagine." He nodded to Dom, who had entered behind him and now sealed the door once more. "The countdown you've been watching isn't for the authorities' notification. That already happened 30 minutes ago." Shocked expressions met this revelation. "Then what?" Diana began. "It's the facility's lockdown protocol," Vince explained. "In 3 minutes, this room will be sealed for 72 hours. No entry, no exit. Emergency rations and water are stored in the cabinet to your right. Enough for one person to survive comfortably. For people." He shrugged. "It will be challenging." "You're leaving us here?" Faye gasped. "Your own sister? The sister who betrayed me to the press?" Vince countered. "Yes, along with the father who abandoned me, the man who tried to kill me, and the reporter who would destroy everything I built. The authorities will find us," Diana asserted. Eventually, Vince agreed. After they processed the evidence I provided about Oscar's operations, Trent's role in Wesley Porter's death, and various other matters. Evidence that notably excludes any mention of Faye or Diana Reeves. Understanding dawned in Oscar's eyes. "You're giving the authorities just enough to satisfy them without revealing your own involvement." "Precisely," Vince confirmed. "A careful balance of justice and self-preservation." The countdown passed the 2-minute mark. Desperation filled the room as the four occupants realized the truth of their situation. "You can't do this," Faye pleaded. "It's inhuman. It's desert justice," Vince corrected. "Harsh but appropriate. The strong survive. The weak perish. The guilty face consequences proportionate to their crimes." "And what about your guilt?" Trent demanded. "What consequences do you face?" "Living with what I've become," Vince replied, a flash of genuine emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. "Knowing that in punishing betrayal, I became something worse than those who betrayed me." For the first time since the desert ordeal began, Vince allowed his mask to slip completely, revealing the toll his vengeance had taken on his own humanity. In that moment, his resemblance to Oscar was unmistakable. The same cold calculation, the same unflinching cruelty disguised as justice. "You're more my son than you ever wanted to admit," Oscar observed, a twisted pride in his voice. "Yes," Vince acknowledged, "and that's my punishment." With 1 minute remaining, Vince turned to leave. Diana made a final desperate appeal. "What about Melody? Where is she in all this?" Vince paused at the threshold. "Melody made her choice months ago. She chose survival over loyalty, over truth." A cold smile touched his lips. "A choice you four now face yourselves." As the door sealed behind Vince and Dom, The countdown reached 0. Automatic systems engaged, locking the facility's secure room for the programmed 72 hours. Outside, they made their way to the waiting helicopter. Will they survive? Dom asked as they lifted off, the research station diminishing beneath them. Depends on whether they're smarter than their base instincts, Vince replied. Oscar might have the survival skills, but the others won't trust him. Faye has the moral compass to suggest cooperation, but lacks the force to implement it. Trent is broken already, and Diana cares more about the story than the people in it. You've thought of everything, Dom observed. As usual, not everything, Vince admitted, gazing out at the vast desert below. I never anticipated becoming this version of myself. The helicopter banked eastward towards civilization. Behind them, the abandoned research station stood isolated in the unforgiving landscape, a monument to Vince's meticulous retribution. Within its walls, for people faced the same brutal choice Vince had confronted months earlier. What price they were willing to pay